For the first time since the war began, Russia may be walking back some of their more maximalist war aims. Maybe. Big grain of salt with that one. But we're also taking a look at a few lifelong Republicans here in the United States, laying out why they think Russia is just tapping us along and how President Trump can and should increase the pressure on Putin. Now, starting out here with some reporting from Reuters where they say, quote, Putin is demanding that Ukraine give up all of the eastern Donbass region, renounce ambitions to join NATO, remain neutral, and keep Western troops out of their country. Nothing new there. That's pretty consistent. They say in the most detailed Russian-based reporting on Putin's offer at the summit, Reuters was able to outline the contours of what the Kremlin would like to see in a possible peace deal to end the war. And this is where it changes. I'm going to pull up a map because it's all about the territorial control and where Putin is drawing essentially the ceasefire line. They say, in essence, the Russian sources said, Putin has compromised on the territorial demands he laid out in June 2024, which required Kyiv to cede the entirety of the 4 provinces Moscow claims as part of Russia, moving from the northeast to southwest, that is Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson. Now, the challenge here, and we've talked about multiple times in this channel, is Russia does control about 99% of Luhansk, about 70% of Donetsk. You see this territory here, the tan and green, is territory held by Ukraine, never before taken by Russia. Russia also claims ownership of this territory in northern Zaporozhye and this territory in western Kherson. So there's a lot of territory here that Russia has not yet taken that they are claiming ownership of. And in some of Putin's recent demands, he has outlined that he wants international recognition that all of that is Russian territory. That appears to be where he's walking back a little bit. They say in his new proposal, the Russian president has stuck to his demands that Ukraine completely withdraw from the parts of the Donbass it still controls, so still withdrawing from Donetsk. In exchange, Moscow would halt the current front lines in Zaporozhye and Kherson. So that's the trade. Whether you think it's a good trade or a fair trade is a different story, but Putin would halt the front lines down here in the southwest. In return, Ukraine would withdraw from all of Donetsk. There's a lot of detail here that gets glossed over with that high-level deal. The big component here that I would stress is that the defensive fortress in here cannot be understated. I mean, this is territory that Ukraine has held. I mean, if you look at the number of Russian casualties in this war, my gut tells me the vast majority have come right in this little circle here between, let's say, Pokrovsk. Actually, we'll go a little further. Yeah, we'll say Pokrovsk and Severodonetsk. This area here, this arc, has been so well defended, it has cost the Russians countless casualties. I mean, just look at the map, at how much progress Russia has made. This pinkish purple area here is what Russia took and controlled in 2014. So when the war began, the large-scale, full-scale invasion began in 2022, this was already the forward line for Russian forces. This is how far they've moved. We'll get a ruler out. Right here near Toretsk, it's been 8 kilometers. You know, this major breakthrough they just had, oh, now I'm going to mess it all up. This major breakthrough they just had is 70 kilometers, right? The tactical breakthrough they had in that area. So this area, very well defended, a lot of fortifications. It would be significant for Ukraine to give that up. Now, as a part of that, Russia has said that they would be open to swapping some of these territories they hold elsewhere in the country. We talked about this in previous videos when the term land swap was brought up because it was, well, we know Ukraine is going to be asked to give up territory. What exactly is Russia giving up? What's the swap there? And Russia has said they're open to giving back territory, open to the conversation, that is, here north of Sumy, here in Kharkiv, a couple different areas near Vovchansk and elsewhere, and then just a sliver of land over here in Dnipro. So there's a couple areas we've seen Russian forces start to push into Dnipro. Not much there, but they've said, we'll give that back. The challenge that Russia faces in this agreement is those little slivers of land, there's not much there. The big ask of Donetsk, this is a very strategically significant chunk of land, especially when looking at the possibility of a future war between Russia and Ukraine. So we'll see if anybody actually moves on that one. It would be, if this ended up being accurate, this would be the most significant concession so far by Russia since the war began. We've seen Russia be very consistent in their demands since day one, whether you think they're reasonable or not. They've pretty much held to their guns. This would be the first time they've really been walking anything back publicly. But here's the thing. I don't really believe them. I believe the reporting, and I believe that somewhere this was said or floated in the media. I don't believe it because Russia does not have a good track record long term of keeping their promises. And in the short term, it seems like they throw things like this out there and then just walk it back sometime in the future to prolong this conflict on their own terms. I don't, to be blunt, a little bit of a downer, don't have a lot of trust or confidence in the word of Vladimir Putin. What I do have a lot of trust and confidence in is you all, because we just got this fundraiser going like a week ago and we're already at $78,000, which is insane. And I'm going to show you the rewards that we just rolled out today. So this is for thermals, night vision devices, comms equipment, drones, and more for the volunteers, the international volunteers of the Azov International Battalion. We've been able to do some awesome interviews with those guys as a part of this fundraiser. But what we have now for the top 2 donors, I've never seen this one before. This is kind of unique and really cool. Pieces of a Shahed drone that was shot down over Ukraine. Got the markings on that still? No, I have no idea how we're actually going to ship that thing out. That's up to the wonderful people at Zynga's Paw that are running the back-end administration and logistics on this. Also, for those top 2 donors, we've got a signed flag from the team over there at the Azov International Battalion as a thank you. The next down $2,000 and up, we've got a plaque, unique plaque here from the Azov International Battalion saying thank you. And then at $500 and up, we've got a different breed TV patch from none other than Vegas. I know a lot of you went over there to check out his channel after some of our interviews. Awesome guy doing a really impressive breakdown of like the tactical situation, reviewing combat footage from the front. A guy who's there in it right now. But anyways, link to this fundraiser is in the pinned comment and description below. Pretty cool rewards. Hopefully we wrap this thing up here in the next couple days. And I should mention, anybody is grandfathered in. So if you gave $2,000 or $500 like a week ago when this first started, you are going to be contacted to receive those prizes. All right, now moving back into the report here today, one of the reasons I'm not super optimistic about this actually playing out is it seems like every time Russia gives a little, you just got to give it a couple days and they walk it back. And the most recent example here is Lavrov, the foreign minister, arguably the most important person when talking about these peace talks from the Russian side, second only to Vladimir Putin. This is like Lavrov's statements on this, I would argue, carry more weight than, say, Secretary Rubio's statements on this. Lavrov has a lot of influence in Russia around this whole situation. And we should keep in mind, as I play this clip here, the next major concrete step following the meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska and then Trump and Zelensky and the European leaders in the White House was a meeting. That was the next thing. Remember, we don't need to do a ceasefire because everything has been resolved that would have been resolved during a ceasefire. A meeting. Maybe just between Putin and Zelensky, maybe Putin, Zelensky, and Trump. That's the next thing. Get it on the calendar. Lavrov says, not yet. Here we go.
So bottom line, there's no meeting planned.
President Putin said clearly that he is ready to meet, provided this meeting is really going to have an agenda, presidential agenda.
So that's a big if. There's no meeting planned, Mr. Foreign Minister. That's a big if. You're saying there's no meeting planned right now.
Kristen, I am awfully sorry, you're not listening. There is no meeting planned, and I'm not challenging this. But you cannot, I think, understand what I am saying. Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky when the agenda would be ready for a summit. And this agenda is not ready at all. President Trump suggested, after Anchorage, several points which we share. And on some of them, we agreed to show some flexibility.
Okay.
When President Trump brought those issues to the meeting in Washington, with Zelensky present together with his European sponsors, he clearly indicated, it was very clear to everybody that there are several principles which Washington believes must be accepted, including no NATO membership, including the discussion of territorial issues. And Zelensky said no to everything. He even said no to, as I said, to canceling legislation prohibiting the Russian language. How can we meet with a person who is pretending to be a leader?
All right, so I think a lot of times in international relations, foreign affairs, and politics in general, a lot of people try to overcomplicate it. And they're like, well, there's all these different reasons why this. Just think of how you would view this as a person, right? At the end of the day, we're all just people interacting with other people. Communication is communication. If you're trying to interact with somebody like Zelensky or some of the European leaders, and they say, yeah, meeting in the White House on Monday, let's go. And they put out notes saying, we're ready. Where are we going to have this? We'll go wherever you want to have it. Not in Moscow was one of the things Zelensky said. We're not going to, that's ridiculous. But we'll do this meeting. Where can we have this meeting? We're ready to go today. Drop of a hat. Let's make it happen. And then you go to the other side, right? And they're like, guys, listen, there's so many, it's too complicated for you to understand. There's too many moving pieces, and there's some things we need to get sorted out. Again, just as an individual, if you are having this interaction between two people, you would clearly look at one of them and say, why are you being so unnecessarily difficult? That's been the theme with how Russia has handled a lot of these negotiations. So it's not a surprise. It's frustrating. Not a surprise that we're still, a lot of things we need to do before we would actually consider that first concrete step. In fact, we've got a couple reactions to this. Surprisingly, Russia's been kind of heading in this direction in the last couple days. So this was even an interview here with John Bolton, who today I think is busy with the FBI, like going through his house or something, which is crazy. Not totally caught up with what's happening there. So I don't know, but former national security advisor for President Trump yesterday talked about how he believed that Russia is just kind of tapping us along. They have us exactly where they want us because we continue to delay. And he mentioned this before Lavrov's even most recent statements. Let's give it a watch.
Well, I think the Russians think that they've got Trump back as Vladimir's friend, sort of doing what he wants. And when the president was flying up to Alaska, he said, "We're either going to come out with a ceasefire agreement, or there will be very severe consequences." And there was no ceasefire and no severe consequences. On our Sunday talk shows a few days ago, Secretary of State Rubio, in response to several questions, given nothing came out of all these meetings really concrete, will you begin now to consider applying sanctions to Russia as the president threatened? And Rubio said, no, this is the worst thing to do at this point would be to apply pressure for Russia, because that would sink the possibility of a peace agreement. We'd consider sanctions only if the whole process completely broke down. Well, as long as the Russians can ride it up to, but not beyond that point, I think that's what they're going to try and do. I don't see much progress here. I think the next appropriate point where you might get a meeting with Zelensky and Putin and Trump, or separate meetings, could be the convening of the UN General Assembly in New York in September. That's another month away. Well, nothing happens.
So something that's regularly brought up, that whole idea of kind of red lines, which maybe this isn't quite the exact comparison here, but I always think of Obama when chemical weapons were used by Assad in Syria. That was a red line he drew in the sand, and then we didn't really do anything on the back of that. And a lot of people around the world, a lot of his political opponents here in the United States said, wow, that sure makes us look weak. Again, international relations doesn't have to be as complicated as people often make it seem. If you're a parent and you lay out a red line for your child, and the child crosses that red line and there's no repercussions at all, they learn from that, right? We're smart people across the board. So you can look at some of these threats that Trump has made recently, the sanctions or a ceasefire type talk, as a sort of red line. And I think it's very fair. We've seen some reporters push back and say, why are you just walking back from that? That was a self-imposed red line, and we walked back from it. And the interpretation from Russia likely is that they can get what they want in terms of delaying action so long as they just keep moving this loosely in the right direction. I mean, if you step back and look at how Russia has operated over the course of the last, say, 2.5 weeks, since Trump came out and said, I'm really frustrated. I know Putin's answer. We're going to have to do something here. I'm frustrated with him. If you were Russia and you wanted to simply delay this process and drag it out to where the United States gets frustrated and walks away, or at the very least you get to continue to execute the war as you see fit, what else would you be doing differently right now? I mean, if a delay is exactly what Putin wants, he's doing it very effectively, kind of dripping these things out one at a time. So it's hard not to see that as exactly what's playing out. And I'm not a genius for saying that, right? There's a lot of people. Maybe I am. I don't know. Maybe all these guys are getting their points from me. I just happen to make the video after they say the thing. But anyways, we've got another Republican here, Tom Tillis, pretty laid back interview that he's giving. Now, I should mention, and he's talking here about Putin is just tapping us along, I should mention Tom Tillis is kind of on both of these guys. Bolton and Trump have a lot of animosity at this point. Bolton's been very critical of President Trump, albeit he is still a Republican, so in President Trump's party. Same with Tom Tillis, Republican senator, who is not running for re-election this next year and has, in the last few months, I'd say, kind of taken more of a hardline stand against some of President Trump's policies. And the reason I wanted to play some Republican point of views here is to show that a lot of this, support for Ukraine and cracking down on Russia has been viewed in recent years as a Democratic view or a Democrat view in our political parties. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. Historically, that tends to be rather bipartisan, if not a little right-leaning. So these guys, not necessarily right in line with everything Trump does, but definitely representative of some segment on the right side of the aisle, rather hawkish in a lot of ways. Anyways, here's Tom Tillis talking about Putin's just tapping us along at this point.
A while ago, President Trump on social media wrote that he was wondering if Putin was tapping him along, meaning stringing this out. Mm-hmm. Is he?
How can anybody objectively look at what's happening now and conclude otherwise? I was like, yeah.
So does the president need to snap out of something?
I'm hyperbolizing, let's say, the ending comments. Okay, look, Mr. President, we'll see you in September. In the meantime, I'm going to kill hundreds more people. I'm going to kidnap and torture others. But we'll get back together after Labor Day. That's what Putin was saying. He is tapping us along. And I hope that people just stand up and recognize he's a liar, he's a thug, he's a murderer, he's a rapist, he needs to go.
Look, Tillis really not holding back in this interview. I don't think I could ever do an interview on either side, either talking or asking the questions while eating, because when it's go time, it's go time, and it would just be embarrassing to be like 3 minutes into the interview. It's an hour and a half long. My food's gone. So interesting way to go about it. But Tillis kind of runs this down a little bit. I like some of these statements he makes. He harps on for a minute why Putin invaded Ukraine, and he kind of gets at something a little deeper than we normally hear. And I think this is important because so often, just within the last 2 days, we had President Trump talking about how it's because of Crimea and NATO, and then Vice President Vance, I think, addressed it much more appropriately, saying that really it's not the cause of the conflict, but the issues right now are territorial concession, territorial control versus security guarantees. But here's Tillis going even further back, saying this is just Putin trying to reinstate and not let go of something that he thinks is good, as in the Soviet Union. He's mentioned that before. Here we go.
This is a fight between, it's a reemergence of the Cold War. Vladimir Putin has no interest in democratizing. The provocation of Ukraine was not that they thought that Ukraine was going to attack Russia. Putin's provocation is the fear that a former Soviet satellite could become a thriving Western democracy. That is his fear. He is afraid that democracy can take hold in the former Soviet satellites, and that will be the beginning of the end of his failed communist totalitarian experience. And giving him even a modicum of a win gives life to his belief that this world should be under totalitarian rule.
I kind of like the line, the failed communist totalitarian experience. I feel like that it wouldn't make for a good YouTube title, but I don't know, that just hits in a lot of ways. Now, they do get into what should this look like going forward, not just looking back. This is a lawmaker, right? This is one of the people that should be able to at least have some degree of say in how we approach this conflict going forward. So he has asked the question, would you accept some sort of land swap? And look, I don't know, maybe I'm a Tom Tillis fan. I liked his answer here. Here we go.
So when the president pushes for peace and talks about land swaps, how do you internalize that?
I think I can only accept that if the Ukrainian people are behind an agreement that the current president, Vladimir Zelensky, agrees to. If he doesn't, then we've got to defer to them. Let's say that the tables were turned. Let's say a fictitious country to our south or our north invaded Texas or some northern states. How would we like it if Germany said, you guys are just going to have to accept, in spite of the fact that tens of thousands of people have been murdered, that you have internationally recognized borders that were invaded by this fictitious country, that your children have been systematically raped, the parents have been assassinated, you need to give up land. how do you think that the American people would turn to another fictitious country in Europe that says, y'all need to settle for that?
So the reason I like that, the whole idea of I will accept it, but it's not really up to me. It's up to will the Ukrainian people accept it. That's not just a matter, I think too often that's presented as us kind of conceding control, like whatever Ukraine wants, we're willing to do. But there's another way to look at this where if we force a peace agreement on anyone, there's a good chance it doesn't hold. I mean, we have the historical examples of that, where an unjust peace is forced on two parties. It either reignites the conflict sometime down the road because one of the two is so upset with how poorly they were treated, or it just never really stops in the first place. So the idea that it doesn't really matter what Tom Tillis, thinks is right or not right, if the Ukrainian people are behind some sort of agreement, that's a very good starting point. Now, he does hit on a little bit what more could be done right now. And this is one that I can't for the life of me figure out. Maybe I'm just really bad at American politics or something. It's so confusing every single day. But we have this sanctions package sitting that Senator Graham continues to talk about, like every chance he gets, is this wonderful sanctions package that we're doing nothing with. It's just sitting there. And Tillis is asked about that, and his suggestion, do it now.
I think a ceasefire, that we should move on sanctions until there is a ceasefire. Period. I think that what Lindsey Graham's put together, we should pass out of the Senate. I think the president shouldn't have a problem with that. I think he can hold it in the House.
Why is the Senate waiting for permission from the president?
I don't know why. I wouldn't. I mean, if I were the majority leader, I'd put it on the floor. It's got 87 bipartisan co-sponsors. Put it out there.
87 bipartisan co-sponsors. That's the thing where it doesn't. I can't. Who knows? Why not? It seems like that one is ready to go. Let's do that. Let's add some pressure to actually see some progress from Russia. We're still not doing that. The India tariffs are probably the closest we've come to some sort of actual concrete steps to pressure Russia to wrap up this war, or at least begin good faith conversation of some sort. And those don't appear to be doing much. The last I saw on that front was the Indian government said they are going to continue buying Russian oil. So that's a chunk of that sale. And some of the private companies that originally said they were going to stop have since reverted because it's so profitable for them to do that it doesn't really matter if on the other side there's tariffs for Indian goods coming into the United States. So I like the Tillis answer there. Let's layer these sanctions on right now, try to force Putin and Russia to the negotiating table to actually see some sort of progress. Because as we sit here today, they are still kicking the ball down the road. They are still walking back some of the things that we thought were agreed upon, at least according to Witkoff, Rubio, and President Trump. And who knows, doesn't look like there's going to be any actual meeting set anytime soon. But that's all we got for now. Again, as a reminder, we got some pretty cool rewards for that fundraiser. Link in the description and pinned comment below. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.